Welcome back to another episode. It's your partner 91 Smoke here on this beautiful Monday morning, December the 13th. Listen, make sure you're checking out the Roll Up Network for all your content needs. Search Roll Up Network on all social media platforms, and I promise you, we won't disappoint. Today I have a special one for you. Tallahassee doesn't have many entertainment attractions outside of football season, but there's been one that stood the test of times, and that's the Tallahassee Automobile Museum. Mr. DeVoe Moore opened the Automobile Museum in May of 1996, and the rest has been history. I'm gonna tell you, I visited the first time I went here was in '97 or '98. So that's just to let you know how important this has been, how much a staple it's been to the community in Tallahassee. Jack Adkins, who is the curator of the Tallahassee Automobile Museum, joined me for an in-person interview. We talk about everything under the roof, from the massive doll collection to the fan favorite, the Batmobile. I want to thank the Tallahassee Automobile Museum and Jack Adkins for allowing me to come in and do this episode. Mr. Adkins, I want to really tell you I appreciate you once again. This is my first in-person interview. Usually I do them on Zoom. This is my first one in-house, and I really appreciate you. It went so smooth, man. As we get into 2022, if you have anything you want to get the word out about, or if you would like to just sponsor Smoke Screen, or even digging in the ashtray, contact me on my social media and my main one, 91_smoke on Twitter, or hit me up at smokescreen5491 at gmail.com. That's smoke, SMOKE, screen, SCREEN, 5491 at gmail.com. Also, don't forget to visit my YouTube page by simply searching 91 Smoke. Going forward, all episodes will be placed on YouTube. You gotta have them visuals to accompany the audio. Sometimes you gotta act like you got it before you get to it. You understand what I'm saying? I appreciate you once again, and remember, respect my hoopty. Y'all have a good week, and I appreciate you once again, man. It's a great episode. Appreciate y'all.
What's up? It's your boy Batman. You're chilling with Smoke on the Smoke Screen Podcast.
All right, welcome back. I'm here with Jack Adkins, here down at the Antique Car Museum in Tallahassee. It's been a staple in the community in Tallahassee and Leon County for, I'm 30. I was in elementary school in the 90s, so at least since then it's been a big staple, at least on the east side of Tallahassee. And down here, because it's very interesting around here. Me and my wife came here a couple of weeks ago, and I just walked around, and it's grown so much since the last time I've come. But Mr. Adkins, if you can just introduce yourself.
My name is Jack Adkins. I'm the curator here at the Tallahassee Automobile Museum here at Mahan and I-10 on the east side of Tallahassee.
Yes, sir. So first question I got for you. The prices that's on display for the cars, are those legit prices?
They are. It's really mind-boggling whenever you look at some of them and they go a few decades back and you go, oh, I could have bought this for like $1,000, as opposed to obviously the value of the car is much higher than that now.
Yeah, that's because I was like, it's like a couple of those over on the far side over there. They were like 2,500 and around that price. And I was like, man, I always thought these cars would be like $30,000 or $100,000.
Well, and they are. They might be now, depending on what their value is set now. But that was one of the things, like with Henry Ford, with the Model Ts in your 19 teens and 1920s. He was mass producing so that the average person could actually potentially buy a vehicle, and that's what's mind-boggling, that they could actually do that and sell them for hundreds of dollars, and people could actually afford them.
Would you by any chance know how long it would have taken the average person to pay that off? You think, with like a paycheck that was around that time?
Probably would have taken them a couple of years, because like you're saying, whatever the known salaries were at the time, you made a few $100s a year. But that's again what Henry Ford was trying to do, because whenever you get into the top of the line manufacturers and they got into thousands of dollars, well, that was just out of reach for most people back in the 19 teens, 20s, 30s.
Yeah. Now, one car that was interesting to me and my wife was the 1999 Shelby. What's important about that car?
Well, that actually is it's a Shelby Series 1, and it is the first car that Carroll Shelby actually designed and built from the ground up. It's not like everybody pretty much knows him for the Shelby Mustangs. Well, the Mustang obviously is built by Ford, and basically the Shelby Edition is an aftermarket add-on as far as the performance and all those types of packages. So this was the first car that he had ever designed and built from the very first nut and bolt, and then also that it has got a perfect weight ratio from front to back, and so its performance and stuff is exceptional. I was lucky enough to be able to actually drive that one whenever we had a photo shoot many years ago down at the Campbell Stadium, and that was quite fun.
So are all the cars operable?
They can be. We take the batteries and the caustic materials out of them just so that they don't sit there and basically, corrode themselves.
Yeah.
So yes, they can be. We'd have to do some prep in order to get them running.
I got you. Now let's make our way on over to the dolls. So I'm gonna tell you, my wife didn't want to go inside the doll section. She just sat back and watched me go in because I was trying to take my notes for this episode. But she was kind of scared about it. But the doll section, those are that's quite an interesting section. Is there a particular one that you like the most in there, or that's a big fan favorite?
Well, actually, it's not one, but probably our Barbie doll collection is pretty large. We've got over 300 Barbie dolls, and that has been an icon in the U.S. And again, that's a lot of what we focus on is Americana in our museum. So we have certainly a couple of Barbie dolls that are worth a few $1,000s, and we have several that are worth hundreds of dollars. So.
What's the rarest one that what's the rarest one that you can call off the top of your head that you have?
It would be one of the Barbie dolls that we have, and again, some of those because again, you don't really realize it, but the Barbie doll itself goes back to 1959.
That was one, yeah.
So you really don't realize that they're that old, but they are, and they're quite collectible. If you have an original Barbie, they could be worth 20 something thousand, $30,000.
What came first, the Barbie doll or the G.I. Joe?
I believe Barbie. G.I. Joe came in, and again, that'd be another good one because if you have an original one, which there are very few of, they've got a high value. I believe Barbie, but I'm not sure right off.
Yeah, I know my mom always used to talk about the G.I. Joe with the Kung Fu grip or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, that would have been in the 70s if I'm not mistaken. Yeah.
Yeah. And let's go on over to the pianos now. My grandmother, she has a grand piano, an old grand piano in the house. It has I don't think it's been tuned up since like the 80s, but she has one there. So I've always been interested in pianos and like the price and how much they appreciate over time. What's so interesting? What's so important about the Steinway piano in that brand?
Well, Steinway it is an American company out of New York, and they have been known on up. I guess they started somewhere in the early 1800s, and from them they've always been known as a high standard. So most of the Steinways they take 2 to 4 years to build, and if you're looking at a grand concert D Steinway, and it's just not that you call them a basic piano, but if it was just the regular Steinway without any of the as we have, like all of ours, our special editions, you're still looking at almost $200,000 in what one would cost. And so it's a very professional, very refined, very well crafted instrument, as opposed to like if there is a company called Grand, and they made pianos that would look like a grand piano, but that was actually they're made by a furniture company. They were made by a furniture company, and you could buy those for a few $100s, and they'd be considered what you would call a entry or a beginner level or a home piano. So there's a whole variety and different levels and why they are different levels.
Yeah. So has anybody any musician played on any of the pianos that you have in there?
Actually, we have many of ours. Well, I say many. We have the 500,000th piano, which is a signature piano. We also have the Peace piano, which was also did UNICEF around the world tours. So both of those pianos have been around the world several times, and so especially the signature piano has been played by a lot of the Steinway performers. Elton John and a number of others that have actually played that piano at special events. Because that piano is actually our oldest one, and it's from 1987, and so it went around the world a number of times before we ever procured it for the museum.
I got you. It's just so amazing because I often when I came in, I was thinking when I came and visited, I was thinking these are replicas, and I just had to remind myself these are originals, and that's pretty amazing that you even are being around original pianos and original things in the museum like that. Just an off the head question, real quick. We'll move on. Like, how does it feel like to be a curator, like around all this important?
Well, it's a dream retirement job for me, because, like you said, there's just so much history. There's so much that you can look at, and you can actually see the original thought. Like now, cars have all of these bells and whistles. They're all very commonplace, and you can go and look at some of our cars, going through the 19 teens and the 20s and the 30s and even some of the 50s, and you can see like, well, that's the first time that was put on a car. If you know what you're looking at, and I mean, and to think about, okay, somebody had that original thought, how clever that was, which we all take for granted now because it's just the standard, but back in the day, it wasn't.
Yeah, and it wasn't the norm to think outside of the box like that, to come up with those designs to make the cars like they did on that. That is pretty interesting. As a kid, one thing that I was always interested in was at the old car museum up on Mahan was Lincoln's carriage.
Right.
And that's once again something I had to remind myself that's an original. That's like the original carriage when we were talking before we started recording. I was looking at the display. It hit me that when the presidents are buried now, they go through the rotunda. But then I was noticing how they had the map of where Lincoln went and the states that he went through. Like, could you was that the first time that a president had went through that? Went through the passage that he had to go through to go to the burial.
Well, the main reason why he has his route was because you were going from D.C. to Springfield, Illinois, where he was laid to rest, and you did have the railroad that you could take all the way there. So some of those processions would have been, I guess you would say, hindered depending on what time it was in history and whether you had a railroad available or whether, wherever the person actually might have been laid to rest rather than DC and those things. So like with Lincoln's procession, mainly it was done on the railroad, and then there was 13 cities that they stopped at, in less than 14 days in order, to make it from DC to Springfield, Illinois. And the interesting thing, because a lot of people go, so that's the hearse. Well, that is one of the hearse.
Yeah.
Because each location
had a different one.
If they offloaded him. And so you actually had, I have a list here. It says you have one train, which was the Lincoln Special, and then you had the caisson, which was in D.C. because that was military, and then you had a funeral car in New York. You had two ferries because during the procession they carried him across the Hudson twice in order, where the city stops were, and then you had 9 hearses at different cities.
Yeah.
Because again, these are horse-drawn hearses. So rather than having to have a hearse and then 6 horses that you have on a train that you stop, it was just easier to go ahead and set up. And of course, obviously, there was no lack of volunteering, a hearse.
Yeah, man, I didn't think about the 9. It was 9. There was probably more than one hearse. So
Oh, absolutely.
that's pretty. Like, do you know where the trains are at? Do they still have the train that he like in the museum? Or you think?
I don't think they did because it was they might have some of the cars, but I don't know that they actually have the engine anymore.
I got you. Now let's make our way upstairs. The first thing I noticed, I'm a Gator fan, so I know I'm a Florida State fan. Listeners gonna be pretty happy about this. But the first thing you notice, because you're going upstairs, so you know, humanly when you're going up, you're gonna look up. So when you're going up the ramp and you're looking up, first thing you see is Bobby Bowden and the FSU memorabilia. How important is the success of Florida State to the museum? And Bobby Bowden that he was to the museum.
Well, Mr. Moore obviously was very good friends with Coach Bowden, and obviously decades of interaction. We had many of the football events, as far as banquets and things like that, at the museum here, or even the previous location. So, I mean, there's a good connection there. And then obviously, Mr. Moore's been, a very staunch supporter of Florida State as far as academics and also their athletic programs for many years.
Yeah. So Florida State fans, y'all gotta pick it up, man. Y'all gotta have another good season, a better season next year. Maybe you can beat the Gators, at least keep beating the Hurricanes. But one thing that I loved upstairs was the size of the dollars, and I never realized that the dollars. Not I graduated with a criminal justice degree from FAMU, but my minor was in history, African American history. But one thing I love history. One thing I never noticed and realized was the size of the dollar and how the dollars dwindled down. But I haven't noticed. That was probably like in the 30s or 40s. And then now the 70s, and then the 80s and the 90s, and now we're going to crypto, and sliding our cards now. But could you give some insight to the listeners on how the size of the currency has changed over the years?
Well, it was 1929 whenever they downsized the size of the bills, and it was purely economic, because you had a standard currency sheet that they would make the bills from, and then they would cut them from that. And so basically they went from being able to put 9 bills on a currency sheet to 12. So basically increased, without doing anything other than just changing the size of the bill, they increased their efficiency by 33%. And so that's how that came about at that point in time. And of course now we know that your silver dollars, and then also you used to have gold, any of the precious metal coins. Obviously, we've gone completely away from that and those types of things.
Do you think it'd ever be a time where like silver dollars would be like rare, or silver pieces like the Kennedy piece?
Well, I think whether they're rare or whether they become more valuable, and it might become more valuable mainly because of the percentage of silver, as opposed to it being a particular, president on whatever coin.
Yeah, I know. I keep me and my wife, we keep, whenever we come across a Kennedy piece or any silver dollars or anything, we try to keep them, just because you never know in the future. It might be worth something.
Well, if you look, and that's a good point, if you look at the early coins had mythological persons that were depicted on them.
Yes, sir.
And that was done with intent. They didn't start doing the presidents, I don't believe, until in the 50s. And they're, it's all regulated through law on what you can and can't have on there. And there were specific reasons why they didn't, and then they did, put the presidents on there.
I know it's going off. That's one thing my listeners, they kind of notice about my episodes. I kind of go off sometimes, so just thinking. But there was, you say that, and I noticed, just knowing history, there was a point where America was big into the mythological, the different signs, the astrology signs and things, and then we broke apart from that. Do you know why we would have broke apart from that?
No, I don't. I think that it would. I mean, it's everything is just a sign of the times, and just like there's a lot of stuff that occurs now that obviously didn't occur, in the past. And then who knows, we get 50 years into the future and, whatever we might think is mainstream now is going to be obsolete or deleted, whatever, in the future.
I got you. Now going on down from the currency, I noticed that I noticed the knife sections. Now my grandfather, he always told me, no matter where you go, always keep a knife on you at all times. Now, how big was the kniving industry in the past?
I mean, it's always been there without a doubt. I think we probably have switched a little bit more from knives being the main source of why somebody has a knife is for utility reasons, and there may be more of a trend that goes more towards collecting or tactical knives in today's world. Because now I was raised just like you. You have a knife. I have a knife in my pocket right now. My boys have knives in their pockets. That's just it's just a tool.
Yeah.
And you always have that tool with you. And a lot of people have gotten away from that, which is there's nothing wrong with that. But some of the people have switched to they've collectibles, or either they just have knives for hunting, or some other reason.
I noticed how many different companies were in the knives back then. Like John Deere had, I saw the John Deere knives up there. But do you think the knife market is dying down?
I wouldn't say it's dying down. I think it's just changed directions, just like we just talked. As far as there's still plenty of people, because especially right now, this time of the year, Christmas, and we're a case knife dealership, and there's a lot of Christmas presents that people come in here in order to to get a knife, and it's amazing how many types of knives, and we call them families of knives, because again we sell case knives, and most of our collection upstairs are case knives. Well, if you look, you can see probably about 8 to 10 knives in appearance, as far as the coloring is the same, but if you look at the knives, they're all one blade, three blades, different blades, different configurations, and so people all has there's a lot of preferences out there.
So moving on down, I noticed one athlete that no matter where I see him, man, I always smile when I see him, and that's Dale Earnhardt. Just because I remember when I was in 6th grade, I told my teacher, my 6th grade social studies teacher, I told him he liked to gamble sometimes, so I told him, you need to put your money on Dale Earnhardt this weekend for the Daytona 500. And he didn't do it, and he lost, and Dale Earnhardt ended up winning that day. So I was like, so ever since then, Dale Earnhardt's been my favorite NASCAR driver, man. But can you speak on some of the memorabilia you have of him and why he is one of the most important figures in NASCAR history?
Well, there's a number of, I guess, keystones that he probably was attributed to. One of them would have been that bringing NASCAR out of basically a southeast regional type setting to a national setting, and then whenever you get into like Jeff Gordon and then Dale Jr., it becomes international. So he was really big into bringing it out there, and of course, just like what you were saying, as far as like did he win? Well, he was in the Winston Cup Series for 22 seasons, and he had 20 top 10 finishes in 22 seasons. That's pretty good, and obviously a couple of those, he finished number 1 and several number 2. So I mean, there's a lot of earmarks. Also, unfortunately, because of the crash, and whenever he died, that brought on a bunch of new NASCAR safety features, which it's makes it has made the sport much more safe for the drivers and spectators and everybody involved.
That's one thing I respect about Dale Earnhardt Jr. is sometimes when you had your father or your somebody, your relative, they're so good in a sport, and then you come behind them, and then something like that happens, you might lose your way. Then that might kind of tarnish your name, but he kept going and kept going and kept going. He's still going. And that's one thing I always respect about Dale Earnhardt Jr. and the Earnhardt family.
I don't know if you realize, but the Daytona 500 crash that took Senior's life, Junior was in a car in front of him in the same race.
Oh, I knew he was there. I didn't know he was in front of him.
Yep. Yeah, they were running. I think it was something like third and fourth or something like that, and yeah, he whenever his Senior's car obviously went the wrong way, the top three headed on, and I want to say Junior came in a close second. I could be wrong, but
Man, nothing but respect for the Earnhardt family.
yeah.
But one thing I didn't respect, not respect, but expect, was the baby formula. Why is it important that they keep that into the museum? That was very interesting.
Well, we up there in the little general store, we tried to come up with a setting that would give you kind of a feel for what might or might not be in a general store. And again, like you're saying, these some of these items that you don't think very much about, and then also like even with baby formula, it's been around a long time, but again, it's quite different in today's world as opposed to what was offered,
Yeah.
so many years ago. And again, that's what we try and do with everything in the museum is try and give you just these pinpoints of of items, of reality because you've got them physically there in front of you, that you can draw hopefully something, whether it's historical or whether it's informational or whether it's even, like, wow, I remember that, from,
Yeah.
my past or something.
Yeah. I know I didn't put this in there, but because I know this is what everybody comes here really to see, the Batmobile. Was it? It's pretty good advertising and marketing to have the Batmobile upstairs, so now people have to go through the whole building just to see the Batmobile. But how important is the Batmobile to the car museum?
It's certainly been a major attraction, and we actually have three Batmobiles, and out of the three, two of them are authentic movie cars. And so with one of them, they only made two for that particular movie, and with the other one, they made five because they used that model Batmobile in two different movies. The other thing that a lot of people don't realize is that we have the Penguins Duck Mobile, we have the Bat Ski Boat, not the '60s one, but the one where Arnold Schwarzenegger was the other guy icing all of Gotham. And then we also have one of the four 1960s Bat motorcycles.
That's that's another thing that it didn't click in my mind that those aren't replicas. Those are originals.
Right.
You were talking about the different Batmobiles. Y'all ever thought about doing anything with 007? Like any of his cars?
That it's again we tried to stay more with American,
Okay, I got you. Oh yeah,
and
I got you.
and
Yeah.
so although the 1960s version of the Bat motorcycle,
Mm-hmm.
the Bat cycle, that actually is a 1967 Yamaha motorcycle,
Yeah.
but it was made for the program here in the U.S. They made four of them. They used two of them on the show, and they used two of them to tour and that's what we find with some of our items is that the only way to physically have seen something decades ago,
Mm-hmm.
you wouldn't be able to stream it, you wouldn't be able to see it on TV necessarily. You'd have to go to the that movie premiere wherever it might be, and
Yeah.
then they might have some of these items for you to look at during those premieres.
Yeah, so going ahead and closing up, this has been a great episode. Going ahead and closing up, can you explain the importance of the museums across the country and why they should make sure they keep the museums intact and people should keep visiting museums and keep being patrons of museums?
Well, that's a good question. It's a simple one to answer too. It's just it gives you the opportunity to see things that you will not see somewhere else. And whether it's something that is just a really high valued item or whether it's just something just like you keyed in on the baby formula. It's just something that you wouldn't have seen from that era. And again, we have over 200 different types of collections in here, not just the cars and not just the motorcycles
The
and not
boat
just
motors.
the Batmos. We
Yeah.
have over 300 antique boat motors that go back to actually the very first year that you have a patented boat motor in the U.S. And we have the brass cash registers.
Mm-hmm.
We've got jukeboxes. We've got all just it doesn't end. So if you have a car enthusiast that's driving the car and you have other people in the vehicle, there's probably something that they might enjoy here, even if it's not cars.
That's smart thinking. You brought up that cash register, and that made me think when I get home, I need to call my grandma, cause she always says how, cause I work at Publix on the side,
Right?
so she's always said, yo, the cash registers are different now, they're more easier now. And now I was upstairs, like hold on, now all you had to do was press 15 cent, 30 cent, 50 cent, and then I guess pull the lever, and it added everything up for you. Like that was doing the math for you too, so we need to work something out. We was both both had a little bit of technology. That's been another great episode of Smoke Screen Podcast. I appreciate you once again, Mr. Atkins. I appreciate you once again. That's been another great episode.
Well, we thank you for your interest in our museum, and we're glad that you came down.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. All right, y'all have a good day.